Bristol, England, 2015. 7 volunteers sit down to a plate of food and are told quite calmly that it could kill them within hours. They eat it anyway. The dish is hakarl, Greenland shark, buried, fermented, and hung to dry for months. And in its raw state, it is genuinely toxic, packed with enough compounds to poison a human nervous system. Icelanders have eaten the fermented version safely for centuries. The volunteers weren't reckless. They were testing something deeper than a recipe. What if the food your brain calls disgusting isn't actually the dangerous one? What if the real danger has been sitting quietly in your own refrigerator the entire time? That question is the spine of everything that follows, because across the world, 10 animal products exist that trigger instant, visceral refusal in most Western eaters, and yet almost none of them are unsafe in the way your instincts assume. Some are ancient delicacies. Some are daily protein for billions of people. One of them was once reserved for emperors. And when we finally get to what's sitting inside an ordinary American refrigerator right now, the answer is going to be a lot less exotic and a lot more unsettling than you expect. Start with the shark itself, because it's the clearest case of a symbol doing more work than the substance. Hakarl smells like a chemistry accident, ammonia sharp enough to sting the eyes rising off pale, cubed meat. But the toxins that make raw Greenland shark dangerous are neutralized by months of fermentation and drying, the same principle that makes properly aged blue cheese safe despite the mold running through it. Product number 1 on this list isn't dangerous. It's just honest about smelling like exactly what it is. Something that took a long time to become edible. Product number 2 travels from Iceland to the Philippines, and it asks you to reconsider what an egg even means. Crack one open, and instead of a yolk, you find the unmistakable curve of a beak, the faint outline of feathers, a duck embryo, roughly 2 to 3 weeks into development, a street food called balut, sold by the millions every night from carts lit by a single bulb. It is not an emergency food. In the Philippines, it's often recommended specifically to new mothers and laborers as a dense, reliable source of protein. Picture the closest American equivalent, a hard-boiled egg from a gas station, cooler, unremarkable, unthreatening, eaten without a second thought. Balut occupies almost exactly that cultural slot in Manila. The horror isn't in the biology, it's in the unfamiliarity. But the strangest part isn't what people eat. It's what happens once you realize your disgust might be pointing at the wrong target entirely. And product number 3 makes that impossible to ignore. In Sardinia, a wedge of cheese called casu marzu is only considered properly finished once its surface is visibly moving, thousands of translucent fly larvae working through the curd. It's banned from commercial sale under European Union food safety law, and still made quietly in farmhouse kitchens, because tradition there insists the cheese is at its safest while the larvae are alive. Once they stop moving, locals say spoilage has already begun. The rule isn't avoid the maggots, it's eat it before they die. That single reversal should already be nagging at you. The thing that looks most repulsive is, by local logic, the freshest possible signal. Product number 4 moves the investigation underground, literally, into the deserts of central Mexico, where workers dig into the roots of agave plants to harvest escamoles, the larvae and pupae of giant black ants, pale and glistening, sautéed in butter and folded into tacos under the nickname insect caviar. It isn't peasant food. It's expensive, seasonal, and served in some of Mexico City's finest kitchens, priced closer to imported seafood than to street tacos. Somewhere in that fact is the first real clue about what's actually driving disgust, and it isn't danger at all. Here is where the investigation needs a name, because some cultures just have different tastes, is true but almost meaninglessly shallow. The psychologist Paul Rosen, who spent much of his career at the University of Pennsylvania, found that disgust isn't really about taste. It's about contamination, a near-universal facial signature, the wrinkled nose, the curled lip, likely built by evolution to reject rotting meat and decay long before anyone understood germs. There's a second mechanism riding alongside it, food neophobia, a simple wariness of the unfamiliar, strongest in early childhood, and proven to soften with repeated exposure. Put the two together, and you get the whole engine in one sentence. A child in Cambodia grows up watching relatives eat fried tarantula without blinking, while a child raised on chicken nuggets elsewhere flinches at a vegetable they've never seen. The spider was never the variable. Exposure was. By adulthood, that early wiring hardens into something that feels like moral certainty. And remember, we still haven't opened that refrigerator yet. Which brings the twist that reframes the entire list. If disgust exists purely to protect us from danger, it should track actual risk. Often, it doesn't. Product number 5, bird's nest soup, made from the hardened saliva nests of swiftlets harvested by hand from cave ceilings across Southeast Asia, became, over centuries, one of the most expensive ingredients on Earth, historically served in the Chinese imperial court as a symbol of luxury. The same substance a Western visitor might instinctively call bird spit was, in another palace, an offer fit for an emperor. Product number 6 carries that same collision between horror and prestige into 19th century France. The ortolan, a tiny songbird traditionally fattened, drowned in armagnac, and roasted whole, eaten bones and all, was so wrapped in ritual, diners reportedly covering their heads with a napkin as they ate it, that its hunting and serving was eventually restricted under French and European wildlife law. Chefs kept preparing it in secret anyway. Status, religion, and memory shaped this food far more than nutrition ever did. Product at number 7 isn't luxury at all. It's survival turned in tradition. In Iceland, alongside hakarl, sits svið, a sheep's head, singed and split in half, boiled until the flesh falls from the skull, eyes included. Nobody ate it to shock anyone. After a slaughter, almost nothing could be wasted, and the head was simply food. The same instinct behind an American diner ordering chicken wings or pork ribs without a second thought about which part of the animal they came from. Product number 8 looks like desperation and is actually precision. In the deserts of Australia, Aboriginal communities have eaten witchetty grubs, the fat, pale larvae of certain moths, for tens of thousands of years, not as emergency rations, but as a genuinely nutrient-dense staple, rich in protein and fat, traditionally eaten raw or lightly cooked over coals. It's one of the oldest continuously eaten foods on the planet, older than most nations currently arguing about what belongs on a dinner plate. Product number 9 looks rotten. It isn't. Century eggs, duck or quail eggs preserved for weeks in a controlled mixture of clay, ash, salt, and lime, turn the yolk a deep green gray and the white into translucent amber jelly through careful chemistry, not decay. The color is what makes it terrifying. The chemistry is what makes it safe. That gap between how something looks and what it actually is the entire theme of this video in a single dish. Product number 10 may be the hardest for an American viewer to even picture, let alone name. In Japan, shirako, the soft, custard-textured roe sack of male cod or anglerfish, is served raw or lightly grilled in high-end sushi restaurants, prized by connoisseurs the same way foie gras is prized in France. It is, quite literally, milt. A delicacy built entirely on the willingness to look past what an ingredient is and simply taste what it's become. 10 products, 10 cultures, and most of them aren't dangerous in the way your disgust instinct insists they should be, which is exactly the point the mismatch has been building toward. So open that refrigerator now, the one we mentioned at the very start. Sitting inside an ordinary American kitchen, unremarked and untouched by disgust, are foods like raw milk, undercooked ground beef, and unpasteurized soft cheese, items that carry measurably higher documented food safety risk than balut or casu marzu ever have. No wrinkled nose, no hesitation, just familiarity, doing the opposite of what it's supposed to do. Flip it the other direction entirely. Fugu, the Japanese pufferfish, contains a toxin so potent that a fraction of a gram can be fatal, with no known antidote, and it's still served in licensed restaurants across Japan by chefs who train for years and must pass strict certification before touching the fish. Diners pay a premium specifically because it's dangerous, treating the risk almost as part of the flavor. Disgust, it turns out, was never a precise risk calculator. It's a rough, inherited heuristic, tuned by evolution for rotting meat and open wounds, then endlessly overwritten by culture, ritual, status, and habit, which is exactly why it can feel so certain and be so wrong at the same time. And that mismatch is about to matter more than tradition alone would suggest. Insects, crickets, mealworms, silkworm pupae, sold roasted on Bangkok street stalls or boiled in Korean markets as biondegi, are, gram for gram, comparable to beef in protein and require dramatically less land, water, and feed to produce. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization has published research estimating that around 2 billion people already eat insects as a normal part of their diet, not survival food, ordinary Tuesday dinner. Several European countries have recently approved specific insect species for human consumption, a shift that would have seemed unthinkable a generation ago. The food a large share of the Western world finds most repulsive may, within a few decades, be one of the more sensible answers to feeding a planet running short on land and water, which brings the investigation to its real destination, not the shark, not the maggots, not the embryo in the shell, but the mirror all 10 hold up together. Every culture draws its own line between food and horror, and every culture is quietly certain that its line is the natural, obvious one. The French diner who savors a snail in garlic butter recoils at a scorpion skewer. The American who orders a hot dog without reading the label might refuse a grasshopper taco outright, though the two aren't nearly as far apart as they feel. There is no universal menu of the acceptable. There is only the accident of where you were born and what your grandmother put on the table before you were old enough to have an opinion about it. Disgust feels like an instinct pointing at danger. Most of the time, it's actually pointing at home. So the shark in that Bristol dining room was never really being judged for what it was. It was being judged against a lifetime of dinners it didn't resemble. Somewhere in Reykjavik tonight, a plate of hakarl will be served without ceremony, alongside good conversation and a shot of the local spirit traditionally drunk to cut the smell. And no one at that table will think, even for a moment, that they're eating anything strange at all. Somewhere in Manila, a vendor will crack open another tray of balut under the glow of a single bulb, and a queue will already be waiting. The line between delicacy and horror was never drawn by the food itself. It was drawn by us, quietly, generation after generation, at kitchen tables we never chose, and it moves a little every time we do.